Good Friday evening. I'm Christian, and this is part 4 of building the progressive web app with React. So in the past episode, or in the previous episode rather, we laid out the main kind of skeleton of the application with React and React Root. So we ended up creating our 3 pages, a blog list page, a detail page, and the about page. And we could navigate between all of those few pages, and things seem to work pretty well. So this time we're going to be testing our components with Jest and Enzyme, and just kind of the advantages maybe they would bring over using the React test renderer, and maybe Mocha and Chai, maybe like if there's a few easier things what we can do to kind of get them set up and running. And hey, good Friday evening. I'm Christian, and this is part 4 of building a progressive web app with React. In the previous episode, we ended up laying out the main skeleton of the application using React and React Router, and we had our 3 basic pages that we could navigate to. We had a blog list page, we had a blog detail page, which just displayed the full post, and we also had a little about page. And it was a full working site. We could navigate between all of the pages, and everything seemed to work pretty good. So in this session, what we'll be doing is we'll be using Jest and Enzyme. Just a little brief introduction to them, how they can fit into the testing areas of our application with React, and the niceties they kind of come with. So yeah, it'll just be a really shallow dive into those to start with, just to get our components tested. So if you want to be part of the live stream, then a good thing to do is to hit subscribe on YouTube, and hopefully you'll get notified when I go live. Alternatively, you should be able to follow along on Twitter if you hit somewhere down in this corner. There's a Twitter handle, and you can follow along there, and that would be cool as well. So let's jump in. And so Jest is a JavaScript testing framework from the people at Facebook. It's really nice. It's almost the kind of equivalent of something like Mocha or Chai or Jasmine, or one of those kind of tools. But it has quite a lot of nice things kind of set up and kind of configured for you if you need to take advantage of them. So a few things what it maybe does a little bit differently is it has coverage reporting built in straight off the bat, which you can just turn on by adding a flag on the command line. If you're using Jest to test code that's supposed to be run in a browser, then it ships with JS DOM if you need a fake DOM implementation, which is cool. And it has this snapshotting feature, which if you're able to serialize anything, then you can create a snapshot of it, and anytime it changes over time, your test will break, and you'll be asked, hey, your test broke, do you want to update the snapshot? Are these changes supposed to happen? So we'll dive into a little bit of snapshot testing as well. And then hopefully by the end of this, we'll have all our components tested, we'll generate coverage reports, and fingers crossed, if all goes well, we can maybe get a build running on something like Travis CI. So you may have heard of Jest in the past, and it maybe got a little bit of a bad rap. But that's all kind of in the past. Jest fairly recently was rewritten from the ground up. So apart from the name and the logo, pretty much everything is brand new and shiny and works great. So if you've been testing with Mocha and Chai like I had previously, it's really good to kind of give Jest a bit of a go, and it eases a lot of the pain points that I certainly experienced with Mocha and Chai. For example, just kind of getting things set up, getting coverage in there with Istanbul, and a few other things like that. So on video 1, I ended up setting up Jest. So I think it's probably good to recap just kind of what the initial steps of setting up Jest were, how we got the tests to run, and then we'll kind of start to retrofit our tests in our components. So, first things first, let's get kind of diving in here. So, first things first, in episode 1, we ended up installing Jest, and we simply do yarn add dev Jest. It's going to install Jest for us, it's going to throw that into our dev dependencies of our package.json file, and it's also going to update our yarn.log file. So then, the only other thing we did is we added this npm script or yarn script, could be run with either tool, and it was just a test script, and we were simply invoking Jest. And what Jest does is Jest is configured to kind of go look through your source files and see if it finds anything that it's kind of expecting to be a test, and if it picks that up, then it's going to run that as a test and run it through the test suite. So a couple of things Jest does to kind of look through the tests, to look through your project for tests to pick them up, is you can create a _tests directory and pop your files in there. Or alternatively, you can just name your files something.test.js or something.spec.js. And they can be anywhere in your project, and Jest's just going to traverse all your directories and pick them up and kind of run with them, which is cool. So for this scenario, I'm not going to create a _tests directory. I'm going to kind of keep everything as local as possible. I'm going to throw the test files in with their components, keep everything together. So when we're working on our code, we've got the component, we've got the test, they go side by side, the test can act as documentation. When we're updating our component, they're right there next to each other. So that's what we're going to go with. So let's just see what Jest does at the minute if we were to run our tests. So I use yarn to run things. You could also do an npmt to run. Exactly the same thing, just invoking it with a different tool. I'm trying to get into the habit of using yarn a little bit more. There's no reason behind that. In fact, it's more to type. But anyway, so we can see yarn's gone through our directory, it's looked and it's picked up our app.test.js file and it's run the test in there. So our test in here is an absolutely rubbish test. It's just expecting true to be true. It runs it. It's perfect. So let's start diving into testing one of our really easy components. And probably the easiest of the easiest one to test is our about component. It's completely static. It's just a function that returns a set amount of JSX. So first things first, let's create a new file and we'll call it about.test.js. Perfect. So because we'll be writing React in here, we're going to have to import React. Nothing unusual about that. The next thing, what I'm going to do, is I'm going to import Enzyme. Now, I'll dive into Enzyme a little bit more in a few minutes, but essentially what Enzyme is Enzyme's a way of just rendering our kind of React components in a test environment and giving us a nice kind of jQuery API to inspect the rendered React component. But we'll go into that in a sec. So if we import shallow from Enzyme, can I spell properly? Yeah, I think I can. Just about. And what else we need to do is we need to import our components. Cool. So it's probably worth having a bit more of a dive into Enzyme and what it is. So Enzyme is by the people at Airbnb, I believe, and they created it to take away a bit of the frustration, a bit of the pain of testing with React's kind of test utility library. If you wanted to test, for example, in our about component that we were rendering a H1 with the text, "Hi, I'm Christian," you'd have to render your React component, and then using React test utils, you'd have to kind of do .props.children, is the tag name H1, and then do a .props.children again, and kind of say, like, does this text, is the children of this text, that is, "I am Christian." And what Enzyme's going to do for us is we can just say, hey, let's render our about component, and can we find a H1 in there? Can we say, hey, does anywhere in our component contain the text, "Hi, I'm Christian"? And it's very, very easy to use. Again, if you know jQuery's API, you're going to be right at home with using Enzyme. So let's get Enzyme installed as well. So yarn add dev enzyme. So while that installs, we'll just look at the docs for shallow rendering. Again, there's a few different rendering methods. There's shallow, there's mounting, which is rendering the full DOM, and there's a static markup. We'll stick with shallow rendering, probably for most of this video, I imagine. So we can see it's very similar to jQuery. You would have your shallow wrapper, and then you'd call .find on there, .contains to find any of the nodes. Has this particular element got a class? Loads of really kind of convenience methods which make it quite a pleasure to work with. So anyway, enough waffling. Let's get in there. Let's test our about components. And once we've kind of give it a rough test with Enzyme, I'll dive into a little bit of React snapshotting, and you will be able to see kind of the differences of the two and the pros and cons of them. Again, I'm fairly new to Jest and its snapshotting, and things don't quite sit 100% well with me at the minute, and that's just my head and how I write my tests. They don't seem kind of explicit enough to say what's going on, but I'm sure over time I'll learn to kind of combat that and get over that a little bit better. So first things first, let us write our first test. So there's a few different ways of writing tests with Jest. We can either put in a describe and call like about components, and in here we can have the typical it, and this is going to be familiar if you've used kind of Mocha before. And one thing I should mention is Jest also builds upon Jasmine. So if any of this is looking very similar to Jasmine, it's because it is. Jest builds on top of it. I believe they're moving away from being built on top of Jasmine in the future, so things may change, but at the minute that's how it is. So we can write an it block. We can also write a test as well. Ooh, syntax craziness. So either one of those will be valid, and we'll go through both. But for now, let's just keep it simple and kind of go with test. So we'll just say about component should render as expected. So in here, what we can do is we can say our component is going to be a shallow render of about. And if I just console.log component, just to kind of see what we get here. We'll get a lot of craziness out. Okay, one thing I forgot. So we're getting a syntax issue here, and this is completely expected, although it took me by surprise, but it makes complete sense of why we're getting this. If we've watched the previous videos, you'll notice when we set Babel up and Webpack, we only got it to transpile our JSX, and our Webpack is able to understand the import syntax and deal with that. So now we're just running our tests through Node. Node has no idea what this import word is, and it's just saying, hey, do you know what? This doesn't make any sense at all. So to get around this, what we can do is we can say to Babel, hey, in our test environment, can you please convert any import statements into require statements, and then within our tests, everything's going to run perfectly fine. So to do this requires a little bit of tweaking. What we can do, in fact, let's go to Babel's website. I found out the other day it is called Babel, not Babel. So I feel much more comfortable pronouncing it Babel. So that's cool. So there's so what we can do is we can import, we can install simply the plugin transform tool. So it's only going to deal with that kind of aspect of our code, and it's only going to transpile import statements. So what we want to do is we want to do a yarn add --dev and install these Babel plugins. Damn it! So we've got that plugin installed, and what we can do now is we can pop in our Babel RC file. See, as you can see here, we only have the transform JSX in here. So I think what we can do is we can specify an environment, and this environment we can say whenever the node env is test, also include these plugins. This is going to be the transform ES 2015 common JS modules. That should be good. So let's run our test again and see if we're any better. And we have got another little issue. Let's just add that. Yarn add. And it should fail once more time. Yeah, and it has done. So now we're transpiling our import statements to require statements in our test environment, and it's understanding that. The next thing what's happening is, again, we're outside of Webpack. Webpack is handling our CSS imports for us and dealing with that. And again, in regular node land, it's going to try and import this CSS file, and it's going to have no idea what to do with it. So as you can see, we've got a class of heading here, which is our CSS. And it's saying, hey, unexpected token, sort yourself out. So Jest has good documentation for this, if I can find it. Jest CSS. It was easy to find the other day, I assure you. Okay, it's probably in the Webpack section, and okay, so they have documented the exact same setup we've put in place, where in our test environment we're transpiling those little bits and pieces. So there's an extra thing we can install. So for CSS modules, which is what we're using, we can install the identity object proxy to mock CSS modules. So again, yarn add. Our list of dependencies is forever growing. And what it's going to ask us to do now is, within our package.json file, we can add a jest section. Yep, there's all our dependencies. It quickly grows. Oh. Wow. Crazy. I just forgot the syntax then. So we can add a jest section here. That's better. And within jest, we can have this module name mapper section. And within here, we're simply just going to say any CSS files use the identity. I don't want to make a typo. Identity object proxy. So now if we were to run our tests yet again, we're good. We've successfully dealt with the import syntax, we've dealt with the CSS, and we're now rendering our shallow wrapper here and just console.logging everything out here. And we can kind of see our parent element is a div, which matches perfectly fine with our about. So what we can do is we can say, in fact, let's just look at the documentation for this. We can say, no, be more responsive. Don't give me all of this. There we go. So actually, let's have a look here. So we could look for .contains actually. Let's just say, want to see if it contains the string, hi, I am Christian. So let's, in fact, actually, let's just expect that to be true. Okay. We did need that extra one. Oops. Nope. What am I missing? No, that's fine. I just haven't saved. Ah. Okay, cool. So it's finding our text here. So again, this is kind of how I used to have to test a lot of the my React components. Of just saying like, does it contain this particular element? Does it contain this particular string? Has it got a particular class name that's correct? All of these kind of sorts of things. And what ends up happening is it ends up taking you longer to write the tests, far longer to write the test than it does just to write a simple component. So Jest comes along with the snapshotting functionality and makes our life so much easier. So what's going to happen now is we're going to have to serialize our component, and once it's serialized, then we can create a snapshot of it and see if it's going to match up. So what we need is another dependency, and this one's called enzyme to JSON, and I can hear a child moving around upstairs. Let's see how much of this we can get done before we get interrupted. So we can import to JSON from enzyme to JSON. So now we can say our component tree is going to be a to JSON of our component. And I'm just going to quickly log that out so we can see what tree looks like. And you can see this better represents our component. We can see it's a div, we can see it's got two children, a type of H1, and the second one of the type of paragrapher. So this is cool. So what we can do now is we can remove the specific enzyme expect, and we can say we're going to expect the tree to match snapshot. When we now run this test, what Jest's going to do is it's going to create an actual snapshot directory for us and store this test as a snapshot in there for future use. So if I run Jest now, we get given a snapshot summary, one snapshot written in one test case, in one test suite. So what Jest's done is it's added this snapshots directory. Can I make that bigger? No, sorry about that. But within here, we can see exactly what it's output. And we can just see name of our test and almost the JSX of our component, which is great. So this is really handy. So anytime I make a change to my component, the snapshot's not going to match, the test's going to fail. And you may say, like, well, what's the point of this? And it's more of just along the lines of, it's a cheap, easy, dirty test to write, and it's just that extra clarification of, oh, was I supposed to change this in this component? Did I make, like, no accidents are going to kind of slip through the net, or reduced number of accidents are going to slip through the net? It just makes you stop and think a little bit more of, was this change intended? And we'll get a diff when the snapshot's outdated. So what we can do is we've generated our snapshot, and if I decided I wanted to change this to just remove the exclamation mark here, I'm Christian, full stop instead. Let's keep it a little bit more formal. So if I was to run the tests again, we notice they fail, and we just get a diff, and we can see exactly the difference as what's changed. And we can either correct our issue if it was an accidental change that we made, or if this is the right decision, what we want to do and want to change, we can run the test with -u update, and Jest is going to update the snapshots. So one snapshot updated in one suite. We have a look in here now. It's updated the snapshot for us. We're good to go. So I'm just going to write a few more snapshot tests for the rest of our components, which should be fairly easy to do. Again, a lot of our components are really simple. There's really not that much to them. So header.test.js, going to be very, very similar to our about. Okay, so we should just render our header component here. Run yarn test again. And we've had another snapshot of our header component. Nice and easy. Again, super quick, super easy. It's a test that pretty much writes itself. Now home, I'll leave that for a moment. Again, just run this one again. Perfect. That's passing. Now post is going to be quite a good one to test actually, because we have this turner operator. So we're saying, given we pass a particular prop in, render this, or alternatively render something else. So that will be a good one. Post detail will be good as well. So one thing I want to do quickly is I just want to rearrange our app a little bit. And I want to throw in our app into our components. So let's see how badly things are broke. I imagine quite badly with imports. So we should hopefully be able to clean those up. We're not using that anymore. Ooh, where's that? In source index.js. No way. Yes way. And we're still breaking. So our JSON file, which we're bringing in from now, ... Ooh, probably 3 directories up. Localhost 8080. Yep. Cool. Our app seems to be working. So I've just popped our app component in with the rest of the components now, which just feels a little bit nicer. Now, our app contains a bit of code which is going to probably be quite hard to test. We have our browser router here, and within here we have a list of matches. The problem with this is when we're testing in a Node environment, we're obviously in Node, we're not in the browser, so we can't use the browser router. What we're going to have to use is we're going to have to use the memory router and tell the memory router, hey, this is the URL we're on, you should render this particular component, whether this is the home component if we're on the home page, the about component if we're on the about page, etc, etc. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to refactor the code a little bit so it's going to make it easier for us to test. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder called, not like that, called routes. And within routes, we'll create a new file just called routes.js and routes.test.js. So let's just clean a lot of that up. So in our routes file, I'm going to extract a lot of the thing from app into there. So first things first, we're going to import React from React. We need to import match and miss from React router. Gonna need all our components as well, actually. Let's just rip all of these. Hopefully that should be most of them. And then I'm going to create a routes component. Export. And in here, what we're going to say is we're going to say we just want these few bits here. I'm going to have to wrap them in one parent element for React to be happy. And we're going to have to import our posts because that's how we filter everything down. So we can take that out of there, import this here, and then within our app.js file, let's import routes from routes. And then fingers crossed, what we can do here, we've got this name. So let's just see if that's still running. Header is used. Okay. That was obviously an import I brought in and I wasn't supposed to, because header still belongs in this file here. And yeah, unused imports. Yeah. Okay, let's just see if our app's working properly. Which it is, that's nice. Okay, so that's nice. We've kind of extracted our routes out into its own separate component. This is just going to make it a little easier to test. So in our routes test file, let's import React. Let's also import. Now we're going to use mount here, and that's because we want a bit bigger of a render. We don't just want to render this like one little component. We want to, or maybe we could get away with shallow. See if we can go with mount to start with. See if we can change it in a minute. So we also want memory router from React router. Gonna need a little bit of our own code now, so we're gonna have to import routes from routes. And so what we should do is we should make a test that says, if we're on the home page, let's test the fact that we're rendering a home component. So naming test is always the hardest thing in the world. Let's do that last. So if we say our component is going to be a mount of, this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because what we're going to do is we're going to wrap our routes inside of the memory router. And I'm going to just quickly double check the documentation to make sure I'm going to do this right. So let me just find React Router's documentation. Router. There it is. So we have the memory router, and in here we have initial entries and initial index. So for our code, we want the initial entries I am going to just throw that in there. Just to be our home component, or our home route rather. And then we'll set the initial index. I don't know why. Initial is such an odd word to type. And we're going to set the initial index to 0. So I'm going to render based on we're on the home page, and then we're going to say we want to expect component.find to find our home component. Let's just see that its length is going to kind of exist and going to be 1. So we're going to import home here. So a nice thing with with Jest is it ships with its own tool to kind of watch itself and watch all the files in all the directories below. So if I was to run yarn test and pass in watch, perfect. Okay, let's have a look. Can't find home. No, you probably can't. And as you can see, it's watching the files perfectly fine. Now what Jest does quite nicely is it does a bit of an analysis on your code base and on your tests. And if you're working in a really large application, I'm out of grapes, damn. If you're working in a really large application, you maybe don't want the whole test suite of hundreds, if not thousands of tests to run every single time you save a file. So what Jest is going to do is it's going to say, okay, you updated this source file or this test, therefore I'm going to rerun all the tests associated with that particular source file, which is cool. So nice little productivity boost in development. You can press A, and A is just going to run all of our tests all the time, or if we press O, it's only going to run tests related to the changed files. Our application's so small, I think just running all the tests all the time is fine. Once it grows, yeah, get that O in there. So we seem to be rendering okay. Just to prove it's kind of working, and we are just receiving one home component. There we go. So it should render. Again, we'll name this test. I'm going to name it horrendously. I always get told off, or when code reviews come back to me, it's like, yeah, you should have named that test better. I'm just bad at naming tests. So it should render the home component when visiting / and we can just duplicate this test and change it ever so slightly for about, so we can say when we visit the about page, we should render an about once. Yep, so we're doing that nicely. Now, we have... I've just got a message. I've just got a message from a colleague who's obviously watching the live stream saying, haha, that's me, that tells you off. Thanks. Live chat, get in the live chat. Tell me exactly what you want these tests to be named, and I'll do it. Damn. Busted. Cool, okay. The other page I kind of want to do now is the... Oh yeah, is this page where we have /post/ the slug. What we're in here. And... what we want to do is I think this is post detail. More messages. Apparently the test names aren't too bad. But would they get past your code review? That's the killer. So let's give ourselves a little bit more space. Okay. This isn't going to work, is it? This is not. It is passing. No way. Yeah? Bossing it. So, one last test, which is to test our miss component. If we don't hit a root that's recognised, we want to render not found. And they probably would pass the code review. Nice. I'm on fire tonight if that's the case. This never happens. When visiting, 404, not found, or something generic like that. And it's not defined. Let's import it. Cool. Okay, so that's kind of our roots tested. We're just making sure on a particular page we're rendering the right component. All's good. I'm sure there's a lot more to do. Welcome to the boring world of testing. Can I test posts now? I receive props. And within those props, yes. Okay, this should be easy, he says. So let's create a post test file, post.test.js. I'm going to import all the random bits and pieces to the point of I'm bored of typing those out now. So some copy pasta. And import post. Okay, so our not found component should render so that's our post component. So the main thing we're testing in here is if a title link prop is passed in, we render a link with the title, otherwise just render the title. And this is where I kind of find like this, the Jest snapshotting just doesn't quite sit well enough for me. Like I don't seem to have the visibility in the actual test of what's going on. I feel I have to kind of go and check the snapshots. But anyway, we'll write this and I'll kind of explain what I'm talking about. So let's render this and look at our snapshot. So our snapshot is working as expected. We don't pass the prop title link in here, so therefore our H2 simply just contains whatever the title is going to be. Which isn't anything at the minute. So let's actually write the test properly. So we could say title is equal to, what's this? This is a post, my post. Okay, so Jest is going to say, hey, there's something wrong here. So I'm going to just quickly update this snapshot so it's up to date. Start watching again. And our snapshot, we can see my post is in here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to test the other end of that ternary, and by passing title link in here. So what this will do is it's going to render the link component. Again, this is our anchor tag, but our React router kind of link component being brought in here. And we've got my post in there, so that's cool. We've got kind of like both versions of our test in here. Now, the only thing I kind of don't like about this too much is our test, our body of our test for the most part is kind of the same. There's no part in my test where I'm kind of like inspecting like the component, for example, to contain, for example, like a link. And for me, I just kind of get that extra bit of visibility if that was actually there in my test. And I guess I'm just going to maybe have to rely on test names a little bit more, and looking in the snapshot files, it just seems a little bit more long-winded, but it can be done with snapshots, and you can test both scenarios. So it's cool. We'll go with that for now, and I'll update those test names in a little bit. So the only other thing I think we need to do is we need to do our post detail and our home. So our post detail simply accepts props and renders a post based on the props provided. So for this test, new file, post detail.test.js, import React from React. All of this boringness again. Let's rip it. Rock the post detail, and in here post detail component should render as kind of expected. Okay, so new snapshot has been written, and again with these snapshots, don't put them in your kind of git ignore file. You want them committed into the repo. You want to be sharing your snapshots with all the other developers on the project, so when they come in and they start making changes, they can go, ooh, yeah, my snapshot tests are breaking. Let's do something about that. So, what's our snapshot contain? It simply contains a post. We could probably throw a little bit more detail in here, but in the essence of speed, let's just say it's rendering a post out correctly. That's fine. We're going to have tests for our posts, so let's leave it at that. Post detail is just rendering a post like it should. Now, the last thing we've got to do is the home component. And the problem we're going to have here is, because of our hacky kind of solution of just kind of importing our JSON file, and for people who didn't watch the previous episode, we are just encoding this JSON file as an alternative to actually going out there and performing kind of like an AJAX request and going off and getting information from a server, pulling it back in. For this kind of simple application, at this point in time at least, we're just importing a list of posts from some JSON file and just pretending we've got them from another place. Now the problem with this is I ended up importing it into two places. I ended up importing it into our I thought I imported it into our app. It'll be in our routes now. So yeah, it got moved, didn't it? So yeah, I've got it imported into our routes, and I've got it imported into home. And I really just want to import this in one place and pass any information down. So that's what I'm going to do now. What I'll do is I will take out the routes from here and let's pass them down. So within our routes file, what we can do is we can just say this is going to be a function which is going to return a home component, and this home component is going to have posts equals to posts.posts. The reason why it's posts.posts is because we just want to access this array here. So we should be able to throw that down. Fingers crossed. Things are breaking. Things are breaking. Okay. Which should be fine once we've cleaned up home. It should be okay. So let's import posts here, and then we can say post.map on here. I'm just going to double check that this works. Okay, which it doesn't. What's happening? Save me. Ooh. I don't need to access post.post in here then. Okay, so yep, everything's working as we kind of expected it to. So our tests for our home file, let's get those in. home.test.js. Again, this is going to be very similar to before. If I can find a test file somewhere. Okay, a decent test file somewhere. So we can say, what we can do is we can give our home component some kind of like JavaScript array of posts and expect it to render a certain number of posts on here. So the home component should render as expected. We'll leave the test name there for now. So yeah, we've got an error here, so it's expecting posts to be passed down, and we're trying to map over that, so it's fine, it's undefined. So let's just create an array, and in here let's just throw in one of these for now. And we can simply say posts is equal to posts, and we've got a snapshot written. And we can see home is simply rendering one post. And that's cool. Now, what we could also do as well is we could just maybe add a little bit more to our test. So we could just maybe say we're going to expect the components. And we're just going to see if we can maybe find post length to be 1. And I know the snapshot's doing this, but again, this is just kind of my want to be like maybe just a little bit more kind of explicit in the tests, although it's not required. It just feels like it's something I should probably be doing. And yeah, we can see it's rendering one item. Maybe we could have another test as well, where we would render 2 excellent. That's working. We've got a snapshot, hopefully, of 2 in here, so we can see we've got 2 posts, which is great. Now, there's maybe some change I'd like to make to the homepage, assuming we had an error where we were assuming we were getting posts, and if we didn't get any posts, then everything kind of blew up in our face. So maybe it would be quite nice to say home component yeah, maybe like the home component, if it's not kind of given any posts, then we want the post length to be 0. Okay, cool. We want the post length to be 0. And we could maybe just make a quick change to our home file in here. So we could just maybe say if posts.length and here we can map over them. So if we have posts, let's map over them. Alternatively, let's render a P saying paragraph saying awaiting posts. So you can already see our snapshot tests are failing. And that's this test here. So we were simply just rendering a div before. Now we're rendering a paragraph with awaiting posts in here, which is exactly what we want to do. So we can press U to update snapshot tests. Everything's passing. And in our snapshot test, perfect, we have the fact we're awaiting posts. So hopefully that's kind of like a really quick kind of brief idea of kind of testing with React and the snapshotting of certain things. There's a few other things I quite like about Jest, which I think it's probably worth kind of covering. So we have the coverage command. So by simply just adding -- coverage onto the end of Jest, it's going to run all of this information on our tests, all our coverage of our tests that it finds. So if you've ever used kind of like Mocha and Chai, you've had to configure Istanbul to go and do this for you. It's a royal pain in the bum. 99 times out of 100, you never get it right first time, and you're tweaking around, messing with config changes, and all of that kind of stuff. And it's, yeah, ultimately it's a bit of a pain. So if I look in here now, I have a coverage report, and we can see all of our components are in here, and we can see although JSX sometimes doesn't have as good a coverage as kind of like regular JavaScript, we can kind of see we're hitting all of our files, and it certainly looks like we've got 100% test coverage, so it's pretty cool. Now, what Jest also gives us is it gives us the ability to, if I look in their API reference or configuration, yeah. So if you were using Jest in a non-kind of browser environment, you can turn off things like the fact it loads JS DOM in here. So by default, we're going to bring in JS DOM in here, but if you set the test environment to Node, then you'd completely get away without bringing JS DOM into the mix. And all of this is configured through your kind of like package.json file within the Jest section here. So what we can do is we can also one thing what Jest is actually doing is Jest is only ever going to give us a coverage report of files that we've imported. So it's going to pick up all our test files and it's going to import all of our components because we've imported all of our components there. But you'll notice actually we have a JavaScript file here called index.js, which isn't being included in the coverage stats. So one thing Jest allows you to do is it gives you the ability to kind of collect coverage from a particular set of directories. So in here we could say collect coverage from, and in here we could just say we want to go in source and maybe just pick up kind of like every JavaScript file. And if we were to run coverage again, great. Okay, so actually, it's it's recognised we didn't write any unit tests or any tests at all for our index.js file, and actually, our app doesn't have any tests, which we could patch kind of over time. So this is great if you've got an existing project that you want to kind of bring tests into, and you don't just want the coverage for the files you've tested, collect coverage from, and you'll get a load of cool stuff. Now, another thing Jest does, which is quite nice, is you can set a coverage threshold. A coverage threshold. Man, that was harder to say than I thought. So again, this is nice if you just wanted to set certain standards within the project. So I know a bunch of people who I work with, their threshold is set to a certain amount and they can't submit or can't merge a pull request until the coverage is either equal the amount it was before or it's improved. So the code base over time gets more and more kind of tests. So Jest will kind of let you set, okay, so we want all branches, functions, and lines and statements to be kind of 50% kind of covered. So we should fail this test. No, we don't, but we do. Anyway, man. Okay, that does work. I don't know why it's kind of not showing up here, but maybe it's happy with everything. It's getting late. We'll kind of skip over for that now. So how long's this stream been going on for? Let's check the tubes. 1 hour and 10. Okay, let's start to kind of wrap this up. One thing I do want to throw in here quickly, and I might not have time to do it all because the process seems a little slow, is now we've kind of got tests in our project and things are kind of going well, let's just introduce a bit of kind of continuous integration. Just make sure every time we push, we're kind of like running tests and everybody's cool, everybody's kind of on the same wavelength of where that tests are running, tests are passing, and also we can have nice badges for our readme.md file. So let's do something here. So I'm going to use Travis. I have no particular tie to Travis. I don't feel particularly strongly towards it. It's just free and it kind of works. So to do a little bit of Travis-y stuff, we need to create a travis.yaml file. Let's just add a new file, or .travis.yaml. And in here, we want to set the language. One second. I did have a little quick play around with this the other day, and I just want to remove the app. Let's kill it with fire. Okay, let's go with that. So anyway, looking at this, we need to set the language as Node.js. We also kind of want to specify a Node.js version. At the minute, I'm running on the latest version of the LTS. So if we just specify 6, it's going to throw in the latest version. If you did use the mrc file, it'd pick up that version. The default test script is npm test, which is fine, that'll run our tests. It'd be nice if it ran kind of our coverage on here as well, and we could send our coverage to something like CodeCov and have more shiny badges on our project, which I'll probably set up at some other time. And Travis is going to use npm to install. Not great because we use yarn, but Travis supports yarn, even better. So if a package.json file and a yarn.lot file are present, it's going to run yarn. That is perfect. Caching with yarn. Okay, so caching's good. We want our builds to be fairly quickly. Well, our builds to be fairly quick. So we'll throw that in there. And actually, let's actually get the coverage in place here. So I think there's a script here, and here we can say yarn test, and we can ask it to do some coverage. So I'm just gonna, hopefully you can see this, git status. Holy moly, that's a lot of stuff. And I've done a derp. Shouldn't put the coverage stuff in here. What's the command to undo everything in Git? So let's put coverage in here. Git remove files from staging area. I never remember this. Is that going to work for me? This is where my Git knowledge just falls down. Git reset hard head. Fuck, no. Why'd you make me do that? Cool. That's securely got us back to where we was before. Good job. I've got this on another branch. That was smooth. Cool. Yeah, I have no idea why I did that, probably because it's late, and somebody told me to do that. So, thank you. So yeah, anyway, I've got this on another branch, which is cool. So what we should be able to see now is if we visit visit our Jest branch, we can see, though our build says it's kind of unknown, we can just activate this repository. I'm not signed in here either. Okay, I'm signed in on another browser over here. If I just activate this repository over here. So yeah, we can see once we've kind of done a push, what's going to happen is it's going to throw in everything up to, every time we push to GitHub, it's going to trigger a build on Travis. It's going to install all of our yarn. It's going to install all of our dependencies with yarn, and it's going to run through and pass all of our tests. Cool. Whew. Good job I had that other branch, otherwise all the work would have been lost. And that's what happens when it's late at night and you're coding for so long. You make mistakes. So, cool. Okay, I think that's about everything for now. One thing I do want to do is I do want to put CodeCov in place. Just more shiny, more badges. That's all good. So, yeah, that's probably as far as we'll go tonight, because we don't want to make any more derps. So, in the next episode, I want to look at creating a production build and deploying the blog, or these kind of like few static pages, to a particular hosting site and running kind of Google's Lighthouse tool on the blog. And what we should get is, we should get a fairly bad report from Google's Lighthouse score. And the Lighthouse tool is basically just how progressive our kind of application is, and we're expecting it to be pretty low at the minute. We've got no offline support in here. We're not kind of like chunking our files and doing all kind of crazy things. So yeah, we'll kind of improve that over time. So there's that. I'd also like to get all of the information out of this JSON file and perhaps get that being pulled from an actual API. Now, I have looked at Firebase, and it looks as if the Firebase kind of library you pull in is just monstrously heavy and has way too much stuff in there that I don't need. I don't need any real-time support. I just want to make a request and go get some information. So if anybody knows of any kind of like third-party services that I can use for this code, that would be good. Any third-party services like are just like a remote database or a data store that we can go and pull information from, that would be cool. Please leave a comment down below. So yeah, thanks for joining tonight. All the code is kind of pushed and committed, thankfully, to the repo, which will be down in the description below. If you found this video useful and enjoy watching me screw up all the code for this evening, then hit a thumbs up. And then, yeah, if you want to be notified of any more live streams, then best thing to do is to hit subscribe and get your notifications kind of turned on YouTube. And anytime I go live, you get, whoop, a little notification just to annoy the hell out of you. And I also tweet kind of when I'm going live, so some corner down here somewhere will have where you can kind of follow me on Twitter. But yeah, we'll leave it for tonight. I'll do a little bit of patching up of a few things, of like test names and things like that, and then yeah, let's go and create the production build next time around. Cool. Thanks for joining.